held captive for more than half a century.
Having her home is really righting one of the many wrongs that were done by taking these whales away in the first place.
The one whale everyone wants and wanted is Tokitae.
After orcas were hunted and violently taken from Puget Sound.
It was a brutal capture using deafening explosives in the water.
Sold to aquariums and amusement parks around the world.
I'm in Miami, where Tokitae, an orca captured from the Puget Sound in the 70s, is still being held today. Coming up, the plan to bring her home.
New details about what needs to happen before they move her.
We're going to do this as expeditiously as possible.
Plus, the safety plans to keep her protected once she's back.
I'm in Nova Scotia, where they're building North America's first whale sanctuary. How it plays into the fight to bring Tokitae back to the Northwest.
I think it is a terrible idea.
Not everyone is on board with the move.
And I don't think it's based on what's in her best interest. I feel like it is based on what is in people's best interest.
We hear from those closest to her inside the Seaquarium.
I resigned over this issue.
And those working hard to get her out for good.
I see her. I see her. She sees herself home.
This is Tokitae's journey. It won't be quick and it won't be easy, but the ball is rolling to move the orca, Tokitae, back to the waters she was taken from more than 50 years ago. Thanks for joining us for Tokitae's journey. I'm Joyce Taylor.
I'm Greg Copeland. Right now, preliminary discussions are taking place with federal agencies about moving Tokitae more than 3,000 miles back home to Washington. But there's a lot that goes into relocating an animal that size.
Tonight, we look at what it's going to take to move her, and once she's home, where she'll live and how she'll be protected. We have team coverage from Florida to Canada.
King 5's Erica Zuko is in Nova Scotia, where work is being done to build a whale sanctuary. But first, PJ Randawa is in Miami with a look at where things stand right now.
When you've lived in Miami your entire life, you know there is an orca there named Lolita.
For more than half a century, families like the Grimaldis flock to the Miami Seaquarium.
She's sort of like part of the community. They bring you here when you're a little kid.
All to get a glimpse of their star attraction, Lolita, the killer whale. Today, we know her as Tokitae.
Then you bring your children, and so one day you're enlightened and you're like, wait a second, it's so wrong.
Over the past decade, awareness about Tokitae's deteriorating living conditions bubbled to the surface in Miami, revealing a sad truth behind the star of many happy home movies.
What you don't know, it's obviously, the conditions that this beautiful Lolita has lived in for so many years. There's no home, there's no time out, there's no let me get some rest, let me relax. That is her entire life. She can't even stay away or hide from the scorching sun in South Florida.
In 2015, Sylvia Grimaldi connected with animal rights activist Alejandro Ariel Dintino while protesting outside the Seaquarium.
Yeah, I feel so sad because when you see how she lives, the tank is 3 times her body size, she can swim deep, she can do anything.
Toki's medical records paint a dire picture of life inside this aquarium, with the 57-year-old orca living in dirty water, being fed rotten fish, and forced to perform for crowds despite injuries.
Her story broke my heart, so from that moment I thought I had to do something.
While the protests went on for several years, it wasn't until 2018 that momentum behind the fight to free Toki got a huge boost, thanks to the Lummi Nation.
I started supporting them, and I can't believe just 4 years later, we are close to achieve this goal. We are very, very close. We changed the history, it's unbelievable.
Thank you so much for joining us.
On March 30th, 2023, Tokitae's new corporate owners, the Dolphin Company, made history by signing a pledge agreeing to the orca's return to Washington waters.
More than just moving Lolito to a place where she will be better, she will become a symbol for us and the future generations.
Now, are there no risks at all? Of course there are some risks. There are risks today for any one of us wherever we are. But is this an opportunity to bring her home? Yes, it is.
The plan to return Tokitae to Washington was developed under the guidance of Charles Vinnick with the group Friends of Toki. First, Tokitae would be coaxed into a custom-made stretcher and lifted out of her aquarium with a crane into a small container filled with ice water. From there, onto a cargo plane for a 6-hour flight to the Bellingham airport. Next, Toki will be loaded onto a barge to transport her to ancestral waters in the Salish Sea. There, she'll be put into an underwater sea pen at a private location. She'll receive round-the-clock medical care and feedings. She's expected to live in that sea pen for the rest of her life.
She is active, she is responsive, she's just full of life. And she has demonstrated a will to live that, frankly, almost no other whale has ever demonstrated. 56, 57 years old, ups and downs.
Vinnick's team is already working to secure approval for Toki's release from the several required federal agencies. If approved, those helping fund the move say she could be home by the end of 2023, but only if she remains in good health.
All of this kind of life force all gathered together to bring her home, and it's a tremendous opportunity that we have to work as expeditiously as possible to bring it to fruition.
So we'll just go like right around here.
Yeah. Back in Miami, Toki is no longer on display to the public.
Scully Choctanat.
But a wall and some fencing won't keep out.
We're here to tell you how much you mean to us and how much you mean to the world.
Messages of love.
You're so beautiful, girl, and your day is coming.
For the journey ahead.
The entire world is praying for you, Tokitae. She's a native sister. She's a Salish Sea daughter. She represents everything native and everything pure. There's no what if or what if something happens along the way. She is going home, period.
PJ, how much will it cost to transport Tokitae, and who's paying for this?
Well, the cost of Toki's transport, as well as the construction of her sea pen, will be covered by Indiana Colts owner Jim Irsay, and some estimate that cost could be upwards of $20 million.
A cost assessment put together 5 years ago by the Orca Network shows there are a lot of moving parts. In 2018, the group believed the cost of a cradle and a stretcher to move Tokitae could be close to $60,000. Flying her here could reach $100,000, and once she's back in Washington, it could still cost another $30,000 to $50,000 to get her from Bellingham to the sea pen. And then there's feeding her. An orca eats roughly 150 to 200 pounds of salmon a day, which pencils out to about $1,600 or $584,000 a year. Again, these estimates are from 5 years ago and don't account for inflation.
A lot of steps need to happen before work can begin on moving Tokitae back to the Pacific Northwest. NOAA will be a big part of this process. Friends of Toki, the group coordinating the effort, will submit an official plan to NOAA. Until then, the agency is not sharing any approval steps with us. Friends of Toki says it's too early to say when the application will be filed, but once the plan gets through federal steps, it will then be in the hands of the state. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife says a number of permits will have to be approved. One will be a hydraulic project approval. Anyone planning a project in or near state waters needs this permit. The State Department of Natural Resources will also be involved, studying the proposed area for a sea pen to make sure the environment will not be disturbed.
Once the plan is approved, those close to the project say Tokitae will get training ahead of the move to make her feel more comfortable. They'll lower the water temperature in the tank because the water she's in right now is a lot warmer than the Salish Sea. They'll also get her used to the sling that she'll be moved in, and they'll work with her on behavioral training to help keep her calm during the move.
Tokitae's journey to this moment has been full of ups and downs.
Erica Zucco gives us a look at how we got to this point.
On a summer day in 1970, King 5 investigative reporter Don McGaffin is covering the capture of whales near Whidbey Island.
King 5 was there investigating the captures. The people collecting the orcas for aquariums were using planes to spot them and explosives to separate the adults from the babies.
Several orcas have died during these roundups.
Tokitae's journey has not been easy for her or those trying to bring her home.
This is her home, not in Miami at a cement tank. That's not where she belongs.
The Laktamesh people call her Scally Choctanot. Members of Lummi Nation have fought for her release since she was captured, and to this day continue to pray for her safe return.
It's been a long journey, so think about if it's been long for us, what it's been like for her.
Tokitae was taken from her pond in Whidbey Island's Penn Cove in August 1970.
It was a brutal experience for the whales to go through. They took out as many of the small ones as they could.
She was believed to be just 4 years old. Tokitae was then sold to the Miami Seaquarium. According to the Whale Sanctuary Project, she was sold for about $20,000. She arrived there on September 24th, 1970.
She was very depressed. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't perform.
In no time, Toki was performing for hundreds, but under a new stage name, Lolita. King 5 has obtained video from the 90s of Tokitae working with trainers. She's seen launching herself onto a platform in the tank. In another move, she's seen propelling herself into the air and splashing back into the water.
You know you're not alone.
In September 2020, tribal members of the Lummi Nation went to Miami to mark 50 years since Tokitae arrived at the Seaquarium. In August 2021, the Dolphin Company purchased the Seaquarium, and as a condition of the sale, the company had to retire Tokitae. A month later, the U.S. Department of Agriculture released a report showing the conditions she's living in are impacting her health. Then, in March 2023, the day so many had been waiting for, the announcement that Tokitae will be coming home.
She is ready to come home. Her family is ready for her to come home.
Moving Tokitae home will be one thing. Keeping her protected from too much tourism once she's back is a whole other process. The plan is to put a sea pen somewhere near the San Juan Islands. The group Friends of Toki, among others, are still in the process of selecting a proposed location. Raynell Morris with the Lummi Nation says they have been discussing safety plans for several years now. She says in addition to the net of the pen, they will have a setup in place to keep boats from getting too close. They will also hire a paid security team to monitor the area.
We have an initial team identified that would be part of the operational for the Sea Sanctuary. And that includes, monitoring and being with her 24/7, 365 days. Whichever location it is, we know that is a constant.
She says they can't share all the specifics yet until a location is chosen, but says Tokitae's safety is their top priority. Howard Garrett with the Orca Network says these steps are necessary.
She will be under a very tight security force that will have make a bubble around her like Secret Service, to make sure that she is not disturbed in any way. And that'll frustrate me and everybody else who wants to get closer, but I'm afraid that's in her best interest.
We've asked how much it will cost to maintain that security and haven't been able to get an exact number yet because the plan is still in the works. Caretakers say Tokitae's new home will need to balance freedom with safety.
Lessons could be learned from a trailblazing project that hopes to set the standard for whale sanctuaries. Erica Zuko traveled to Nova Scotia to show us that work up close, including the challenges they've had to overcome.
Nova Scotia, known for its coastal views and fresh catches, could soon earn a new place in history. Getting a glimpse of why Canada could light the way toward a new future for marine mammals takes traveling hours from the hustle and bustle of Halifax. past picturesque rural towns and beyond the reach of maritime traffic sits this cove along peaceful Port Hilford Bay near the town of Sherbrooke. Its calm disrupted only by the crash of waves on a windy day.
This is something that whales like.
It's where Whale Sanctuary Project founder and president Lori Marino says they found the ideal place for a healing space.
And this is pretty close to town, but it's remote enough that there's space.
It's perfect.
The nonprofit dedicated to rescuing marine mammals and providing seaside sanctuaries is navigating uncharted waters as it works to construct North America's first true whale refuge.
We will be there for them. The whales' welfare is our priority, nothing else.
Since it's the first of its kind, there's no finished picture of exactly what it will look like. But here's our depiction of how it could work based on initial descriptions. Crews will construct an underwater net anchored on land at Rocky Point on one side of the sanctuary and Bearschwa Island on the other. It will be made of stretchy 8-inch thick mesh and suspended from a steel frame structure floating around pipes to provide a walkway for staff access to the whales.
They will have depth to dive, which they typically do not in a concrete tank. And so we designed the sanctuary to promote as many natural behaviors and allow the residents to live as whales.
Construction itself will likely take months, but planners say it took 6 years to prepare for that step. They needed multiple approvals from government agencies and are still undergoing environmental review.
And we have a lot of scientific expertise. We know how to do this, but at the same time, it's the first time anything like this is being done.
If all goes as planned, this site will cost $12 to $15 million, with an expected yearly budget of $1.5 to $2 million to operate.
They're moving.
Charles Vinnick worked for the release and care of well-known orca Keiko, the whale that inspired the movie Free Willy. He brings that knowledge to current work as executive director for the Whale Sanctuary Project and to Friends of Toki, a nonprofit coordinating Toki's care. He says there are logistic lessons that can be learned from building in Nova Scotia, but there's also unique momentum and circumstances for Tokitae that could propel the speed of preparations.
She's entertained millions of people. She has, frankly, made millions of dollars for the different people who have owned the park over the years. I think we owe her something back, and I think this is something we can do for her at this point in her life.
Meanwhile, this shore in Nova Scotia represents a possible future for other orcas and belugas, some born into captivity, finally getting a chance at a more natural life.
And I like to picture it from the point of view of the whales. So I come above the surface, and what do I see? I see an expanse of ocean, I see a shore, and below I see plants, I see fish. So their whole world is going to be so much more complex than it could ever be in a concrete tank.
A world meant for them and them only, with buffers planned to prevent boats and spectators from disrupting the peace they may finally receive.
They looked at more than 130 locations for potential sites, narrowing it down and visiting 30, choosing 3 finalists before coming to this one.
Erica, you said they initially narrowed the list down to 3 locations for this whale sanctuary. Where were the others, and why did they settle on Nova Scotia?
Yeah, when they came to those 3 finalist sites, they said that the one in British Columbia was a little too remote. They needed more infrastructure. The one in the San Juans kind of had too much going on, but this one near Sherbrooke was just the right medium, and they say there was also that community support that made it the perfect spot.
And Erica, where will the 8 whales going into this sanctuary be coming from?
At this point, they say that's really still in the works. They say that they're speaking with a number of marine parks that are open to potentially releasing their marine mammals, and they say that once the sanctuary is complete, they'll be able to begin those placements.
Not everyone thinks Tokitae should be returned to Washington.
PJ Randawa spoke with 2 of Tokitae's former trainers and a former veterinarian in Miami, and they all agree the orca should stay there.
Husbandry behavior. This is her participating in her own healthcare.
I spent 18 years with her. That is 35% of my life. Forming, such an incredible love and bond with this animal.
She has slid her entire body out of the water.
She is truly a unique and special animal. I trust her with my child. Introducing my child to her after she was born. My child calls every killer whale Toki now. She loves whales because of Toki.
Animal trainers Marnie Wood and Heather Keenan have each spent more than a decade caring for Tokitae at the Miami Seaquarium. They've since left the industry, but say they had to speak up after hearing about the plan to release Tokitae into a sea pen in the Puget Sound.
I believe it without a doubt, and I know Lolita wants to get to free waters. I don't care what anyone says. She's lived this long to have this opportunity.
I don't think it's based on what's in her best interest. I feel like it is based on what is in people's best interest and what people think is a virtuous moment, for them to feel good, but it's not looking out for this animal and this individual.
We've received death threats.
We aren't here to promote the Miami Seaquarium or the Dolphin Company. We're only here for her best interest.
The day of the news conference when they announced this, I resigned 5 minutes later. Maybe they think they're doing the right thing, but I disagree and I don't want to be involved.
Dr. Michael Renner has been part of Tokitae's veterinary team on and off for the past 30 years.
It's not like we're against releasing marine mammals or sea pens. I'm all for them, but there are candidates that make sense. Time in captivity is number one, or time in human care. 50 years is unprecedented. It's just, she's not a good candidate. Simple as that.
Since the announcement Tokitae would be moved, Dr. Renner and others have formed the group Truth for Toki, dedicated to bringing awareness to the risks of what they call an ill-fated plan.
This individual is not a big fan of change. We introduced a new animal into her pool many years ago, a bottlenose dolphin, and Toki had never seen a bottlenose dolphin before, and she was absolutely terrified. You can only imagine this type of change compared to transporting her all the way across the country, dropping her into a sea pen.
The group doesn't believe she can survive transport at her age, and even if she does, they say her release could endanger her own family.
She's been exposed to things here that they haven't been exposed to. That's putting an endangered pod of orcas, wild orcas that are already in trouble, at more risk. So she's a risk to them.
Yet Howard Garrett, co-founder of the Orca Network, says Toki will be assessed for pathogens by a team of veterinarians and federal authorities as a condition of her move.
Nobody, me more than anybody, I think, does not want any harm to come to southern resident orcas. So we can't let that happen, but fortunately, there are ways to prevent that.
But how long can Tokitae stay at the Miami Seaquarium? Last year, Miami-Dade County deemed Tokitae's arena, including the smallest orca tank in North America, to be an unsafe structure due to corrosion and disrepair.
We all recognize that the situation she's in isn't great. Could it be better? Of course. And we want to do what's best for her.
Over the years, USDA inspections have found Tokitae's been eating rotten fish and living in a tank filled with algae and chipping paint. Some have wondered, why didn't her trainer speak up about these conditions in the past?
We have no control over the size of her pool. We would love nothing more than for her to have a larger facility and it to be either upgraded now or a new facility built for her.
Or if none of those are an option, moving her to SeaWorld. We know that they currently have the proper infrastructure, they have the experienced staff already in place.
SeaWorld Orlando has not responded to our inquiries about this idea, but Dr. Renner believes Tokitae should stay where she is.
I'd like her to live out the rest of her life in her home. The place she's called home for 50 years, the place she knows best. She's not stressed, she's content in that pool. I know that whale very well, I've known her for 30 years. She wouldn't have lived this long if it was horrible conditions, as people are saying.
Ultimately, the group believes they are Tokitae's family, and she already is home.
That's really all we want, is to be a part of the conversation, figure out what the best plan for Toki is as an individual, not as a symbol for killer whales across the country or the world. She's not a symbol, she is Toki.
She deserves, much more than this plan. She deserves a happy, healthy rest of her life.
PJ, we've heard from former trainers, but what about her current trainers? What do they think about this plan?
While Toki's previous trainers and veterinarians may not support her move, we visited this aquarium and talked to staff. They told us that they do want her to go home. Also, the dolphin company recently put out a statement indicating that her current trainers are helping to prepare her for the journey ahead.
Strong emotion fueled the fight to free whales from aquariums around the world. But researchers say it's not just a sentimental issue, it's one of science.
Let's go back to Erica Zucco in Nova Scotia, where she learned the differences between life in a tank and life in the open ocean and how it played into the push for Tokitae's release.
I spoke with a marine neuroscientist who says that even with these whales living within a net, having a perimeter, that kind of life is so much different than living in a tank.
Oh yeah, here we go, dive in.
It's a feeling familiar to many in the Pacific Northwest.
It just spouted. Oh my God, babe.
The jump in your heart at seeing a whale in the wild.
My whole life is made. I can die now.
A far cry from the traumatic reaction felt at seeing that freedom removed.
It's like nothing you've ever experienced before.
Advocates like Amy Simon hope to return that sense of wild ocean to whales.
They have their own self, their own being, and they can do and spend their day how they want to, opposed to being exploited and being rid on and neglected.
Simon is a native of Sherbrooke, Nova Scotia, where the nonprofit Whale Sanctuary Project is building a refuge for marine mammals. She was inspired to help as a child after seeing a whale working as a tourist attraction.
People were in the water with her and touching her, and she got to become aggressive because they don't like that. That really got my head around about how whales are treated.
But it isn't just a matter of the heart. It's one of the mind, says marine neuroscientist Lori Marino.
Well, I've studied their brains for over 30 years now. Everyone knows that these are very intelligent, complex beings. When you look at their brain, you realize that it has a number of characteristics that are even more elaborated than the human brain. And what they do in their everyday lives, you see a lot of complexity there.
She says that complexity craves bonding, social connection, and culture, something seen regularly in southern resident pods.
Orcas, for instance, live their whole lives in family groups. They live in pods. Some of the males, for instance, stay with their moms their whole life. They're the ultimate mama's boys.
Marino says orcas can't get that group interaction or use their brains to their full potential in a confined environment.
They show behavioral stereotypies, which indicate that there's something going on in the brain, they're not developing correctly, and they're hyper-aggressive. All the common signs of psychopathology are found in captive orcas, indicating that they cannot thrive in these facilities.
Her research shows the lack of stimulation in a tank can lead to higher stress hormones, contributing to neurodegeneration and causing animals to develop learned helplessness. That helplessness is why, for now, many are advocating for sanctuaries that set aside large amounts of space so whales can live as naturally as possible with safeguards in place.
And so sanctuary is really the best of both worlds. We're feeding them, we still have 24/7 veterinary care, but they're in an environment that is actually natural, and they can interact with a natural world and do what they want on a daily basis.
The progress means hope for many.
The project notes that not every site billing itself as a sanctuary really is one. They say in order to truly provide sanctuary, there needs to be one priority and one priority only: the safety and care of the animals.
So, Erica, is there a way to build a tank that's big enough to create a more natural ocean-like environment?
Even if you could, it's really not just about the size of where they're being held. It's about all of those natural characteristics, being able to see the fish on the surface of the seafloor, being able to see birds above, all of those things that impact their emotions and their mental health.
And Erica, how is a net different than a tank?
It's porous, meaning that fish will be able to swim through it. They'll also be able to hear under the water, one of the draws with what they're trying to do for Tokitae.
Southern resident orcas lost 1/3 of their population because of whale captures in Puget Sound in the 1970s. At the time, Ralph Monroe, who would become Washington's 13th Secretary of State, led efforts to shut them down. State officials were able to get a restraining order against SeaWorld to prohibit it from conducting any more captures. And a couple years later, in October of 1972, the Marine Mammal Protection Act was signed into law by President Richard Nixon. The national policy prohibits taking marine mammals in U.S. waters, but nothing has been passed by Congress to end their captivity. Over the years, Tokitae has been given several different names. She got the name Tokitae first by the Seaquarium veterinarian who was sent to choose a whale to buy. According to the Orca Network, the vet picked her name after seeing Tokitae at a shop at Pike Place. In Chinook language, it means bright day, pretty colors. Once she arrived at the Seaquarium, she was given the stage name Lolita.
This is her language. This is her water.
Then in 2018, Lummi Nation wanted to give her a name that came from her home waters, so they gave her the name Scally Chuktanut.
The village of Scally was located over in Penn Cove. And so he took the name of that village and commemorated the area where she was taken from.
The tribe says the last two syllables roughly mean female from, making it female from Penn Cove.
Tokitae is believed to be from the L Pod. That is because the L Pod was there the day she was taken from Whidbey Island. And according to the Whale Museum, she still uses L Pod calls in captivity. The L Pod, along with the J Pod and K Pod, make up the southern resident orcas. The L Pod is the largest with 32 orcas. The group often breaks up into smaller groups or subpods. At birth, they are assigned a number by the Center for Whale Research and then later given a name through an Adopt an Orca program. So, for example, L55 is also known as Nugget. The orca census started in 1976 after Tokitae was captured, so she never got a number. Researchers have talked about symbolically assigning her as L0. J-Pod comprises 25 orcas. This pod is on the move. It's known to travel from lower Puget Sound all the way up to British Columbia. And then there's K-Pod, which is the smallest with just 16 orcas. All three pods are known to hang around the western side of San Juan Island because it's a good place to hunt for salmon.
Tokitae has not lived with another orca since 1980. When she arrived at the Miami Seaquarium in September of 1970, she was put into a tank with Hugo, another orca captured near Puget Sound. This is video of the two of them performing together in the 70s. They lived in what was called the Whale Bowl, an 80 by 35 foot tank.
And this is where her remarkable character begins to show, that she accepted her circumstances. That's the way it is. Okay, I've got to live my best life in this circumstance, in this tank.
Hugo died in 1980 from a brain aneurysm after repeatedly banging his head against the tank wall. Since then, Tokitae has either lived alone or with dolphins. The Miami Seaquarium says right now she's in a tank with a Pacific white-sided dolphin named Lee. King 5 has learned the plan is to move that dolphin with Tokitae to her new sea pen. Charles Vinnick with Friends of Toki says orcas are social animals and keeping them together will be beneficial for her health.
If you look at it scientifically, their brains are more convoluted in the areas of communication and emotion than the human brain. So we've seen evidence, certainly here with the southern residents, of their connection to one another, their connection to family. So having her with a companion, even if it's a dolphin companion she knows well, is certainly something that is ideal.
Vinnick says they still need to make sure that regulators agree with all of these steps, but they're hopeful she won't be alone in the sea pen. He also says the trainers Tokitae depends on most will be coming with her for the move.
Part of preparing Tokitae for life in the Salish Sea is priming her for a new environment, including the native noises of Puget Sound.
Calls connect orcas to their pods, and many hope they will help confirm details about Tokitae's family. Erica Zuko explains the lessons that could be learned from the life of another well-known orca.
Capturing history, has meant familiar steps for Joe Olson.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Each time preparing to dip a hydrophone underwater to reveal the soundtrack beneath, giving him a front row seat to historic marine milestones.
And the hydrophone doesn't have to go very deep at all before you can hear the sound.
Olson has spent decades designing, building, and deploying tools to capture underwater calls and noise.
If there were orcas and they were calling and they were a mile away, we would hear them as well.
At this urban marina in Seattle's Ballard neighborhood, he captured the sounds of small creatures living near docks, a sample he played back for us to show how it all works.
All these are the bivalve sounds.
He uses these spectrograms to visually demonstrate recordings and help us better understand what we're hearing.
Now she's whistling. Hear that squeaky?
Yeah.
There's a real... We can zoom in on that.
This sound from a cold morning in 2002 was key to the journey of another orca with a story of rescue and reunion, then toddler Springer. She was found stranded near Vashon Island, leading Puget Sound orca advocates on a quest to find her family and return her home.
Perfect example of how people working together for the best interest of whatever it is works, right? And I mean, I would like to take the whole Springer protocol and have that work with Toki.
Olson taped some of the first recordings of her, tracks used to trace her back to her northern resident pod in Canada.
A lot of her just making her orca baby talk. A lot of it was just these weird little sounds that didn't really mean anything, right? But every once in a while she would make something that was more of a squeal that was the squeal like her pod. So that's what it was, just several hours out in the ice cold water recording her. And that's all it took, right? To be able to narrow down who she was.
Listening to Toki could yield traces of her pod's dialect, and playing sounds for her could help condition her for her new environment.
Oh, I think she'll definitely get relief. She'll definitely get relief by being in the natural waters here. Even with the vessel traffic that we have, I think it's not going to be nearly as bad as what she's been exposed to for the last 50 years.
Many believe Tokitae was part of L-Pod, likely the daughter of L-25 Ocean Sun. Olson also captured their calls back in 1997 when 19 orcas waded into Dye's Inlet.
That noise I just heard. And then clicks.
Yeah. See, now you're recognizing stuff, right?
Work aimed at better understanding how orcas communicate in hopes of helping to restore their well-being.
It's way past time for us to start making things right again. And my hope is that by this really simple act, it may be complex in the logistics, but it's really a simple act of just bringing somebody home.
Some researchers believe that Tokitae could be reunited with her mother once she's back in Puget Sound. Many scientists think that her mom is L-25 or Ocean Sun. Right now, there's no evidence that proves she's Tokitae's mom, but Ocean Sun is about 95 years old, so she is the right age. Ocean Sun is the oldest living whale in the southern resident community. Howard Garrett with the Orca Network says if she is her mother, Tokitae will likely remember.
She was there during the captures. They all were in Penn Cove, so there will be that recognition, I'm sure. Even though it's been over 5 decades, but I think that, their memory capacity and the importance of family members, their lifetime bonding with their families that we now know is how they live together, always, permanently, for their lives. She won't forget. They won't forget each other, even after all these years. I'm sure there will be some kind of recognition.
Researchers tell us that they already have Ocean Sun's DNA, and there is a non-invasive way to get Tokitae's to find out for sure. Right now, it's unclear if that will be a step that takes place before bringing her home. Tokitae's story has touched hearts all around the world.
Her return to Washington will carry a special significance to Indigenous tribes who've been praying for this moment for a long time. Here's PJ Randawa.
From the Salish Sea to Miami Beach and beyond. Support for Tokitae's return to Washington has come from Indigenous communities around the world.
Activist people are here. We'll bring you
We reached out to 8 different indigenous tribes from around the world. And through translation, we know you have your traditions, your ceremony, your sacredness. Pray for her in your way, how you do it. And they did from around the world.
Samuel Tommy is a spiritualist member of Florida's Seminole tribe. He plays this traditional song outside Tokitae's aquarium to send a message of healing.
It's very important that Tokitae goes home. The spirituality of this land needs to be respected.
For years, the Seminole tribe has been supporting the Lummi Nation's efforts to get Tokitae back to Washington. Back in Washington,
I visualize her when I come here and I drum the message and prayer session with her and I see her.
Recent sightings of several orca pods have created a buzz of excitement and destiny on Lummi land.
We were just talking today that J-Pod's been so active since the news broke that she's coming home.
Lummi elder Raynell Morris is one of the only people to get access to Tokitae since she was retired from public view last year.
Skelly Chuck tonight!
She's been able to sing and pray with Tokitae on several private visits to the Miami Seaquarium.
I came after I got back from Miami and gave gratitude because ancestors came to Miami. Our late Chief Salik came to Miami. And so when I came home, I let her family know she's happy. Thanked them for being with me so I wasn't there alone.
Coast to coast, both groups hope Tokitae's release has an impact beyond their shores.
What the Lummi Nation has done is that they have stepped up to the legal field and political arenas where Tokitae is being spoken for. The tribes need to follow this path and give voice to the natural world of this land.
It's the healing of a family. It's the healing and reunification with her mother, her family, her relatives with us. And in turn, that helps the Lactamish people and a lot of Coast Salish people who hold Quethamachen sacred to begin healing.
People are divided on whether Tokitae should be returned home.
But one thing nearly everyone we spoke to agreed on is that orcas should never have been taken in the first place.
So I think that everybody thinks and knows and understands that what happened to Toki 50 plus years ago was horrible. Terrible, horrifying. We would never wish that on anyone, any animal, any person ever again.
Empty the tanks. No animal, no cetacean should live there, same as the zoos or anything like that. It's totally outdated.
When we take orcas from the wild and we put them in the tanks just for human entertainment, we are killing them. We are destroying the whole family. Even the ecosystem too, we are destroying.
It's a step in the right of turning things around from what humans had been doing and claiming possession and ownership over the natural world, and it's particularly over animals.
Bringing Toki back to natal waters is what should be done, and it's good for our soul too.
It's never too late to right a wrong. Whale advocates say that's the lesson to be learned from Tokitae's journey.
A journey we will keep following. Until the next chapter, thanks for being with us.